Now, if you are looking for a power supply unit for your upcoming RTX 5090 graphics card from Nvidia and some of the newer platforms from Intel or AMD, whether that's some of the mainstream options or the high-end enthusiast-oriented workstation platforms like the Intel Sapphire Rapids or AMD Threadripper, then please keep watching this video because this power supply unit is definitely interesting. So in this video we will be taking a look at the Seasonic Prime PX-2200 watt 80 plus platinum rated power supply unit that Seasonic introduced at Computex of last year. So I first saw this model very briefly at Computex when I was there in Taipei, Taiwan for the G-Skill OC World Cup competition of 2024. They actually introduced a bunch of new power supply models at Computex, and the most interesting options, at least for me, were the PX-2200 watt and the TX-1600 watt, mainly the Knock 2 edition. Like let's say if you want to build a brown color oriented system, the Knock 2 edition of the TX-1600 could be a fancy option for you. But at least for me, as I kind of lost the Superflower LeadX 8-pack 2000 watt power supply unit at the later part of 2023 to some 3.3 volt and 5 volt rail issues, I wanted to find a replacement for that power supply unit, a strong unit that could handle very high power situations, so some of the newer graphics cards and also some of the newer CPU generations. And if I just compare the options that are available on the market, the best option, at least for me, is the PX-2200 watt, which is pretty much the strongest you can ever find. And as it's a 2200 watt, that's pretty much EU only. I'm sure you can still probably get this in the US if you have 110 or 115 volt to 230 volt available, then you can probably use this, but this is pretty much a 230 volt only power supply unit because of the high wattage value. Now this is definitely ready for some of the newer hardware, like it's PCI Express Gen 5 ready. It should have two of the new 12 volt high power connectors, so 600 watts each. So this unit should definitely be a good power supply option if you build, let's say, a system with RTX 5090 and some of the workstation platforms like the AMD Threadripper or some of the Intel Sapphire Rapids Xeon CPUs. Now with the newer generations, multi-GPU configurations have kind of disappeared when it comes to normal systems. That means gaming systems and even workstation builds. Multi-GPU does still exist, at least in cryptocurrency mining, but even mining is kind of decreasing subject after the Ethereum mining kind of disappeared or ended, in short words, pretty much. So we don't need that many normal PCI Express power connectors anymore. The shift has moved more towards the CPUs because nowadays the enthusiast workstation CPUs, they draw a lot more power compared to CPUs we had in the past. Like even some of the new Threadripper CPUs, the Sapphire Rapids Xeons, they can draw well over 1000 watts, at least if you start to overclock them. So something like this or the TX-1600 would be a very nice pick for that kind of system. But yeah, so let's take a look at this unit itself. So pretty much the usual Seasonic 12 years of warranty. That's definitely some of the longest you can ever see on any power supply unit. So generally my overall experience with Seasonic power supplies has been amazing. So I never, at least this far, had any annoying issues, but power supply is always the component you shouldn't save too much money on, because power supply can kill any component it's connected to. And I saw this with the unit I'm replacing with this one over here. I lost two very heavily hand selected motherboards to a very annoying and hard to see issue, and that's pretty much the end of that subject because I cannot get them back. I want to use a power supply unit that's very reliable and it can do the tasks I want to use the unit for. Obviously it's fully modular, it has hybrid fan control, that's pretty much the standard nowadays among high quality power supply units. That means that the fan is usually semi-passive. If you use less than 50% of the power supplies, like wattage potential, usually the fan doesn't spin most of the time. So ATX3 PCI Express Gen 5 compatible out of the box. So with this unit you don't need to use the adapter to use the newest graphics cards from NVIDIA. That means 3090 Ti, 4090 and the upcoming 5090. You should have at least two 12 volt high power connectors or cables already from the unit itself, and that should be enough even for the enthusiast oriented graphics card models that will come out from the other vendors. I believe the reference design from NVIDIA only has one connector, but some of the more enthusiast oriented models might have two. So apparently this unit has already been reviewed by Cybernetics. That's pretty much the replacement for Johnny Guru's website, so they should have pretty in-depth analysis of the unit, like how well does it perform, the efficiency levels, ripple levels, etc. I don't have the test equipment available here to test those values myself. So if you are interested in those, then head over to Cybernetics website. So we have 4 16-pin PCI Express Gen 5 cable. I don't know, are these all native from the unit? So do we have 4 native cables or are some of them like adapters? But we'll see very soon. So we can look at the back before we open up this whole thing. So super high efficiency, 80 plus platinum. I believe we haven't even seen any titanium rated unit that's above 2000 watts, but that doesn't really matter too much because platinum and titanium rating, they are very close to each other. We are talking about like 1 percentage point or 2 difference between the two ratings. So 230 volts EU, that means 230 volt only. Fully modular design, top quality 135mm fan with dynamic bearing, micro tolerance, load regulation. So they claim 1% accuracy on the voltage rails. Yeah, Seasonic's latest design keeps the output voltage within a very tight range. Yeah, I assume that's definitely correct based on the usual Seasonic quality. That should be the sound level of the fan. But yeah, usually shouldn't be an issue when it comes to power supply fans, at least for me. But that's a personal subject, like I already mentioned. So let's open up this whole thing. So we have the usual guide booklets, whatever, some installation guide and some cable ties, I assume, and case badge over there. The cables are over here, and here we should find the unit itself. Okay, that's the unit itself. The form factor is definitely not that large, if you ask me. At least to my eye, the overall dimensions look very similar to, let's say, like Corsair's AX1600i and some of the other models. So considering this is a 2200 watt sized unit, the form factor isn't overly large. It's definitely a bit smaller than like the Superflower 2000 watt unit or the 1600 watt unit. So this should still have very good compatibility with most of the cases where you might install this unit inside. And here you can find all of the connectivity. So as I assumed, we only have 2 PCI Express Gen 5, the 12 volt high power connectors coming from the unit itself. Even 2 should be plenty because most people only run 1 graphics card these days, and only the custom high-end graphics card models have 2 of those connectors. The reference design from NVIDIA only has 1. But we have plenty of CPU/ the older PCI Express power connectors over there, 9 in total. We have the 24 pin and 6 connectors for all of your peripherals like SATA and the Molex 4-pin power connector. Now with the power supply unit we get assortment of different power cables. On the right hand side of the screen over here we have the standard motherboard 24-pin power cable, and to my surprise they actually supply you with 3 CPU 8-pin EPS power cables, and that's kind of interesting figure, because if we look at the platform options that are available on the market, the mainstream options usually still have only 2 or up to 2 8-pin CPU EPS power connectors, and the newest workstation platforms, that means the AMD Threadripper and Intel Sapphire Rapids, they usually have up to 4 8-pin CPU EPS power connectors. Some of those workstation motherboards, they have 2 24-pin power connectors just to make dual power supply setup easier, but some boards only have 1 24-pin power connector, but they still have up to 4 8-pin CPU EPS power connectors. So if you ask me, Seasonic could have just supplied the end user with 4 of those EPS 8-pin power cables for the CPU, just to make the overall setup easier if the consumer buys one of these new very large wattage units for, let's say, a workstation system with RTX 4090 or the now upcoming 5090 graphics card. So you can easily just put 4 power cables for the CPU and 1 to 2 of the new Gen 5 connectors for the graphics card, because now the shift has moved more towards the CPU from the older version of the PCI Express power connectors. So this is just me thinking, like, personally, that's something I would have done, because those are shared connectors on the power supplies end anyways. But yeah, healthy criticism is always a good thing if you ask me. On top of those, we get 2 native PCI Express Gen 5, so the 12 volt high power cables. So these have the new connector type on both ends of the cable. So we have the 2 native ones, just like we saw at the connector side of the power supply unit. Then we have 2 adapter style Gen 5 power cables over here. So it's the new Gen 5 connector at the graphics card's end, and then it's 2 times 8-pin PCI Express power connector at the power supplies end. Now some people might think, is it enough? Because we have seen a bit of variation on the adapter for this brand new PCI Express Gen 5, the 12 volt high power connector, ranging from 2 to 4 8-pin, the older version of the 8-pin PCI Express power connector. Because if we remember the old, like standard ATX specs, the 8-pin or 6+2-pin PCI Express power connector is only like 150 watts on paper. So you would need 150 times 4, that would equal 600 watts. Although in practice, any very high-end power supply can supply more than 150 watts through the normal 8-pin or 6+2-pin PCI Express power connector. So even this is definitely enough, but it's something you could like argue about, because it kind of varies. Like EVGA, for example, used 3 connectors for one 12 volt high power connector, and I think Nvidia used up to like 4 on the reference design. So just something I wanted to mention, but 2 is definitely enough on a high quality unit like this, what Seasonic is providing. Then we have 4 standard PCI Express 8-pin or 6+2-pin power cables coming from the power supply. So this is just one connector or one 8-pin at each end of the cable. So it's not like split into 2. So like 8 at the power supplies end and then dual 6+2-pin at the graphics cards, and it's just one connector at each end of the power supply cable. Then we have 4 standard SATA power cables for your peripherals, and then this is actually new. I have never seen this before on other competitor models from other power supply vendors. This is SATA 3.3 volt or SATA 3.3 cable. You can notice the difference between this one and the standard SATA power cables, that this only has 4 wires coming from the power supply. So this should lack the 3.3 volt completely coming from the power supply. It could be some compatibility thing with some older hard drives, but I have actually never used that kind of cable myself, but it's still there if you need to use it. So you have one of those cables and it should have 2 connectors. And then lastly, we have 1 Molex power cable with 3 4-pin Molex connectors. So that could be a bit low amount if you have, let's say, a very complicated water cooling system like I actually have personally, which I'm planning to power with this unit as well. So I might need to find another Molex power cable to power the whole very messy water cooling setup that I have. We have a very large and thick AC power cable for the mains power, and this is actually, I want to mention this first, we have some accessories just to make the cable management easier, but I actually never used these myself. And this is something new, I've never seen this before. This is a 90-degree adapter for your motherboard 24-pin power cable, and this also has a test function for the power supply. So this should be the same thing as connecting the green wire to any of the ground wires on your 24-pin, I assume. So you just put the 24-pin cable to this end of this tool over here, and you just press the button and it should test the function of the power supply unit. But this should make your overall cable management look a bit tidier. But this obviously depends on which motherboard model you are using. If you are using, let's say, some of the EVGA boards like the Z790 Dark Kingpin or similar, they already have rotated 24-pin connectors anyway, but most of the motherboards available on the market still have the 24-pin coming from the top side of the motherboard's PCB. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the cables. So what's the thing about this unit is that this has the strongest 12-volt rail on the market right now, pretty much. So it's 2200 watts on the 12-volt rail, as we can see. So it's 183 amps on the 12-volt rail, and the specs for the minor rails is 25 amps on the 3.3 volt and 5 volt rails, and the maximum combined wattage on those two rails is 125 watts. That is still, yes, that is among the highest what you usually see nowadays on even the most highest end power supply options. Even Corsair, who used to have strongest minor rails on their power supply models like the AX series, I mean even Corsair nowadays has dropped those two or those minor rails down to this level. There's a very good reason for that, because the modern components, so that means modern motherboards, modern graphics cards, they only use the 12-volt rail pretty much. So this could only be an issue if you use the unit for older hardware constantly, but of course 99.5% of the users who are buying this sort of power supply, they only use the unit for new systems with modern hardware and so on. So that's usually fine, but this is something I would like to this is just me like thinking out loud. Would it be possible to beef up these minor voltage rails to what they used to be in the past in a cost-effective way? Like, let's say 30 amps max on the 3.3 volt rail, 30 amps max 5 volt, maybe 180 watts max combined wattage, and small beefing on the negative 12 volt rail and the 5 volt SP voltage. If this kind of unit had those values with the massive 12 volt rail, this would be probably the best power supply for every single use case. Now I would say the rating, my personal rating for this unit is like 9.5 out of 10 or 9.8 out of 10, but you probably get the idea what I mean. Those minor rails, they can be important if you run very old hardware, but of course older hardware generally doesn't use that much power, especially on the 12 volt rail. People who actually buy this kind of unit, they don't usually run older hardware like I do, but this is just something I like to mention because it's something that's important to me at least, and one of the reasons why I wanted to get this unit in the first place after all the drama I had with the Superflower unit. But that's probably just me being unlucky after what I discussed with Johnny Guru himself, because so far I've been using the Seasonic Prime 1300 watt platinum unit, and it has been definitely good enough even for older hardware, and it has exactly the same specs on those minor voltage rails as this unit over here. But yeah, what do you think about the unit itself? Would you buy one of these new power supply units from Seasonic yourself, like the PX-2200 or let's say the TX-1600 or the PX-1600? It shouldn't be that big thing that this is a platinum rated unit and not a titanium rated unit. In the end, this pretty much has exactly the same internals, or nearly exactly the same internals as the PX-1600. The difference between 80 plus platinum or 80 plus titanium is only like 1 percentage point or 2, so it's nearly identical anyways, but you can go with the model you are most interested in. For me it was the 2200 because this has the strongest possible 12 volt rail. If we run, let's say, a modern graphics card in overclocking situation, like for example we already saw some short demonstration by, is it Tony Yu from Asus ROG China, where he overclocked one 5090 graphics card with modern AMD mainstream system. I think it was the newest X3D CPU model from AMD. The maximum power consumption of the whole system was over 1700 watts. So 1700 watts and higher, a good unit for that kind of scenario. If you want to use only one power supply, is either this one or the PX-1600. I'm sure you understand what I mean. So definitely leave a comment down below in the comment section of this video, like what do you think about these units. Huge thanks to Seasonic for providing me with this unit. This is absolutely fantastic power supply unit to use with the newest hardware that's available on the market. So yeah, if you like to see my unboxing and overview of the brand new Seasonic Prime PX-2200 power supply and hear my honest opinions about these units and like my personal views about power supplies overall, then please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Maybe check out my Patreon page as well if you want to support my work. And yeah, thanks for watching some of my videos once again, and I will see you on the next one.